Okay, this next section is going to be the client education during the initial site visit. So what we like to do is prep the client for kind of what's going to happen here. So first thing I like to do is go over mindset. And what I do is I go through, hey, this is going to be expensive, it's going to be dirty, there's a lot of moving parts, you're going to have to be making decisions, you're going to have to communicate, and just keep a cool head. And you've seen HGTV and how there's a lot of drama, and we don't want drama, so just kind of give them a heads up that this is renovations. This is there's a lot of moving parts, so just be patient. Make sure you understand the details, understand what you're buying, and make sure you're communicating well with your contractor. The other thing is, if there's any drawings, we want to go through those, make sure we understand them with the client, and let them know that we're trying to figure out what is going to be built so we can explain that to the bank. We also like to go over how we handle change orders and how we handle reserves. So when we go over change orders, we're going to train you on this, and how to handle reserves, we're going to train you on that too, but I'll give you a quick, brief little information on what we educate the client when we're on site. What we do on site is we say, look, if you run into something that is unforeseen, the bank is going to make you borrow about 10% more for what they call reserves. So if the bid was $100,000, the bank's going to make them borrow 100 plus another 10, so they have 110 total. And those reserves are for, let's say the client or the contractor runs into, rotten wood or termites or something. They can do what's called a change order, which a change order is basically just a mini bid. So it's describing what it is, what the costs are, and then the client signs it, and then we review it and we approve it. And the lender sometimes will have to approve it too. So a change order is a mini bid. You can use the reserves, which are extra funds that the bank makes you borrow for unforeseens. And then we also educate the client that if they don't use up all their reserves and they don't run into a bunch of unforeseens, they can eventually use the reserves for upgrades. So people like to hear that, because now they say, oh, I've got that extra 10 grand, I only needed 5 for unforeseen, so I've got 5 grand left, what do I do with it? We explain to them that they can use it for upgrades, or if they don't use it, it goes to pay the principal balance of their mortgage down. So it's nice to let them know that on site during this initial site visit. Then we're going to go over how the draw inspections work. So we basically tell them, look, when we get a draw inspection from the contractor, it's our job to come back out there, review the draw, and what we're trying to do is match up all the completed work with pictures and the money. So our job is to show up. If the contractor said, I need a draw, and they don't tell us any information, we got to go there. We use our specifications of repair report, and we go through the job. We take all the pictures, and then we decide what amount of work is done, and then we fill out the dollar amounts, and we'll train you on that as far as using the spreadsheet that's in Drive that's already going to be pre-built for you, how to come up with those numbers. And then we tell them we're going to be fast. So we don't want to schedule with the client. We don't want to have to meet somebody there. We literally want to get the order that the client needs a draw, and then we're just going to show up. We need a key hidden or a key box or the door open or something where we can just get in, take our pictures, get out, and move fast. And we can still let the client know we're coming, but we don't want to have to wait around for anybody. Okay, so we educate them as far as what we expect for draw inspections. Okay, the next item we talk about is we're going to go over if items are called out by the appraiser, how we deal with them. Okay, so for example, what I tell the client is, after the appraiser looks at the bid, looks at the purchase agreement, looks at everything, and if they call some item out, so let's say they called out loose and flaking paint and handrails, and that wasn't in the bid, and the appraiser's basically saying that this property is worth this value if all of these things are done, plus these 2 additional things that they called out. So what I tell the client is, if something gets called out, don't get frustrated. It's just some nuisance item that the appraiser's called out. I mean, it rarely happens, but at the same time, if it happens, don't fight it. Add it to the bid, add the loose paint, add the handrail, call it a day. Make one little adjustment and call it a day, because the appraisal's already done. You don't want to have them come all the way back out. You just want to add whatever items that they said needed to be added. So that's just a good practice to have. It gets them prepared in case they run into that. They don't freak out and say the appraisal didn't come back right. It's like, look, it came back, but it just needs some extra, few little things added. And then we talk about reserves and the number of draws. Obviously, there's a percentage of the bid amount that's requested for reserve. So a typical reserve amount is 10%. Now, in some jobs, if like let's say it's FHA and there's no appliances or there's no utilities on, there's no way to test the furnace, no way to test the water. Sometimes they make it mandatory that you get 15 or 20% in reserves. And let's say the project's really, man, it's just complicated. There's a lot of unforeseens. It's a big old house. What I like to do is make a recommendation here, and we're going to ask you to make that recommendation based on what kind of protects the bank and the client. Because the last thing we want to do is have 10% reserves and then they run into a bunch of stuff. It's a $200,000 job and the client doesn't have the money. So long story short, what we like to do is go over the reserve amount, make a judgment call. If the client's got plenty of cash and they don't really care if they run out of reserves, that's a different story. But if let's say they're tight on money and writing a check for 10 grand is going to hurt them, you want to say, let's build these reserves a little higher, a little bigger. Let's do a 15 or a 20% reserve so you got a little bit more cushion. Doesn't mean you need to spend it, but it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Okay, and then we also go over a number of draws. So most lenders are going to want 5 draws. You can sometimes get more, but 5 is pretty standard. And so if the contractor's saying, no way, I can't get this job done in 5 draws, you want to call a timeout, let us know. We can get a hold of the lender, say, hey, there's a problem here. The contractor's going to need some more draws. But this is really just client education at the site, making them feel comfortable that this is not easy. It's going to be a little bit trying. You got to be in the right mindset. You got to communicate. You got to be detail oriented, and you got to be easy to work with. So that's how we deal with the client education on those pieces. And then we go over our need for access. So I always tell them we want a key hidden. We want a combo box. Once again, we're not going to be begging them to let us in, trying to schedule with them for our draws. And it's in our contract that we don't do that. I also go over with them email reminders, once again, letting them know. We talked to them about this in the initial phone call, but we're going to remind them again while we're standing there in front of them that we are going to be sending emails. Some of them they need to do something. Some of them they don't need to do anything. It's just an update. And then some of them are updates, reminders, and just some good education so they know what stage of the process they're in and kind of what to expect and what's coming next. And then we have a handbook. We're going to email this to the client. Some consultants like to print it out and hand it to the client, and some like just to let them get it via email. It's your choice there, but it's just some frequently asked questions, a basic guide, just some good information for the client so they don't have to try to remember everything that you're telling them while you're standing there. And then the other thing we want to go over with the client is updates and extensions. So we tell them that the lender, it needs an update every 30 days. Now that doesn't mean they need a draw or a draw inspection, but they need an update. So what we like to do is we send out automated emails that say, give us an update. How's it going? Is it going well? Do you need a draw? So what we want to do is let the client know when they get an update email, they need to answer it. If they don't answer it, we don't know what to tell the lender, and it causes confusion and it causes people to worry, and then the lender's calling us and then we're calling them, and it's just a fiasco. So if they get update email request, answer the email. And then extension. So what happens is the lender will put a time frame on the job. Typically it's 6 months or less. So let's say the lender says you have 6 months to finish this job and it's month 5.5 and there's no way in heck you're going to get it done. We want to let the lender know this is not going to meet the 6-month time frame. We're going to need an extension. So an extension is super simple. I've never seen them deny an extension. I just know that they don't like projects going over, and if they're going to go over, they want to document what happened, why did it go over, and what's a new estimated finish date. So if that ever happens, we'll walk them through it, but for the most part, let them know that if we need an extension, that they're going to need to help us get that, because a lot of times the bank will want them to sign the extension paperwork so it's in the file. And then I always ask at the very end, is there any additional questions that you have? Most of the time we can answer those. If it's a lender question, we can refer them back to the lender. But just really, how they're thinking, they're going to be coming up with all kinds of questions. Just want to answer as much as we can. So when we get out of there, they feel comfortable, they're moving forward, they're ready to go. And then here's just a few marketing questions that we ask. I like to find out, how did you find us? Did you Google search? How did you find your lender? How did you find your contractor? A lot of this stuff is good information just for us to know, where we should be marketing, things like that. And then if realtors are referring people, maybe we want to talk to that realtor. Maybe we want to say, hey, you've referred this client. We can talk to them about how we can help them. So just a little more information we gather. It's nice to have, so we know where people are finding us.